Buying RAM like it's the 1990s. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Your move, statue creep. Nothing like RoboCop. Nothing like RoboCop there.
All of this has happened before, and it will all happen again. Your RAM Supply Shock Survival Guide.
Back to the grid. We discussed the creation of Tron and computer CGI in general.
And automotive mayhem along with automatic Sega development coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday the 13th of December 2025. Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello. This is the penultimate episode of the year. I hope you're all well. Chris, you've been buying stuff, haven't you?
I do. I don't know if you remember, a few weeks ago, I said you'd asked me if I'd done anything retro. I said I've just been far too busy. So busy, in fact, that I missed out on some games on Marketplace. Didn't have time to pick them up, and they sold. Well, apparently they didn't sell, and they have now. And they're behind me here. So I picked up Battle Chess, Indy 500, and Team Yankee, and a couple of others as well. And so I'm really pleased. Because you know when you miss out on something, and then you realise how much you wanted it after it's gone, and it hadn't gone. So very happy with that. And also, next to me, and I have to show this because I forgot to do it in my pickups video, but you guys were aware of this, I think. The Amiga format issue of Amiga Addict. Yeah, but now I've got it in my hand, and I opted for the floppy disk. So this actually, I haven't written this disk. It came with the magazine, which just feels so special. So they've done a really good job on that. Fantastic, guys.
Yeah, well done.
Oh, I've knocked Battle Chess over. It's all going to fall over behind me.
Let's get into it before Chris wrecks the place. Statues aren't a new thing. They've been around for as long as humans have. We might have started by carving figurines from mammoth tusks, but we quickly moved on to bigger things. The oldest we know of is the Urfa man from Turkey 10,000 years ago. And lately, we've talked about how modern you can be while still being retro, but I think that's probably too far the other end. 10,000 years is. But today's story is about a new statue in Detroit, in Michigan, in the United States of America. And if I apply my UK geographic logic to that, Jason, that's next door to you in the map. So that's what, about an hour away?
Oh yeah, if I start walking now, I can be there by dinner, no problem.
Yeah. I think it's about 6 hours away when I looked in Google Maps, and I was surprised.
Yeah, it's a bit of a haul. There's a whole lake in the way. It's a whole thing.
You can swim.
It's like a whole country.
RoboCop is one of my favourite films, and it's one of my favourite games as well. RoboCop is a fantastic game. It's a nice, slower-paced game, which isn't always the case, and there's something to be said about that. The statue is of Alex Murphy, the protagonist from it, and it's in bronze, and unlike some modern statues I've seen, it is very well done. It really does look like him. The problem with modern statues is that we have plenty of photos of the person in the statue. So if it's bad, like that infamous Cristiano Ronaldo bust, everyone knows what Cristiano Ronaldo looks like. The newspapers can print a picture of the bust and then a picture of the actual Cristiano Ronaldo and see how bad it is. But this is well done. RoboCop was, of course, a 1987 satire about the near future dystopian world that America would become. So in 1987, that's what they thought would happen. Of course, they're very wrong now. And it's one of the most influential films of the 80s for people my age, I think. I got to see it on pirate VHS tapes. We got to see it on clips on the television. And the rather famous British, what's called the ITV version, where the swearing was dubbed into something else. So Duncan, bleeps to the ready. Instead of you, we got you blackguard. And instead of me, it was why me. And instead of
why me?
You're going to be a bad mother, it was you're going to be a bad mother crusher. And it was done badly. It was low quality, bad acting. The voices didn't match, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely fantastic. And I don't know if it's on YouTube. I should have looked to see if it's on YouTube. But if you get the chances to hear how bad these dubbings are, go and do it. It's so bad and so famous that it's been put on as a DVD extra on some releases of RoboCop. We got the game RoboCop from it, not the first big ocean tie-in. That would be Rambo First Blood Part 2, I think, or Never Ending Story. But it would be a massive, massive hit for Ocean. I think RoboCop was the first with multiple mini-games in it, a format that Ocean would use to great success. For example, with Batman the movie, all the way into the 90s, and the Batman the movie famously sold all those Amigas. It's widely reported that Ocean, being John Woods and David Ward, saw the commercial appeal of movie licenses quite early, before they were a big deal, and tried to secure rights at the script reading stage rather than when they're in the cinema where it was more expensive. And that's why they got RoboCop for less than $20,000, the license for it. They'd have all that success with the home versions that they were then able to sub-license it to Data East, who made an arcade game out of it. Now, the figure they charged is not documented, but it's said to be six figures, said by them to be six figures. So that means that they were in profit by the time they did nothing because they bought a license, sold part of it, and still kept the bit that made them a fortune. So it set up at Ocean to do these types of things, and not just at 8-bit and 16-bit systems, as I remember. They also took it with them into the 90s for massive console games like Jurassic Park, where they paid anything up to 100 times the cost of the RoboCop license for a film. I know, Jurassic Park, a bit bigger than RoboCop, maybe? And then sadly, they got EA'd, not by EA themselves, but by Infogrames, but it did go like the normal EA acquisition, and Ocean then faded to nothing. Chris, tie-in games, you a fan?
I'm definitely a fan. I mean, Batman the movie, as you've mentioned, and RoboCop as well, both stunning games and very similar, like you say. It's almost like we've got a template, it works. Let's just make another game for another title, right?
Yeah.
Other tie-in games, like let's not forget Star Wars, right? We're all fans of the Star Wars arcade game. That's a tie-in game, and the home ports weren't too bad for that. Cobra, I mean, that's a bit Marmite. The movie's a bit Marmite, as is the game. You either like it or you hate it. Home Alone, Days of Thunder, the list goes on. Some great, others not so much. But Ocean always seemed to always do a better job than most of the others. On the topic of statues, though, Sony did a big temporary display, so not quite a statue, and I'm talking big temporary display in Australia recently, and it was a full-size spaceship, so think single-man fighter style craft, and they made it look like it had crashed through a portal into a park in the city to promote PlayStation. So, yeah, I think that's a really, really cool thing to do.
I'm sure RoboCop was a big film in the USA, and I know that the Ocean game did make it across there, but I have a suspicion it wasn't as big a hit in the USA as the UK. Is that right? Am I guessing
I think
right?
that's accurate. I think this may be a watch this space housekeeping. If somebody can give me an assist on if we can find reliable kind of sales figures for something like that. But no, I mean, the RoboCop home adaptation was here. I definitely played the arcade version as well. So yeah, obviously the film was a huge, huge hit. Yeah, it's interesting that they got the rights for. I mean, that was a major release that they got the rights that cheaply, because the market for film licenses in the 1980s is really a moving target as far as pricing goes. On the Retro Adventures, we just covered the text adventure tie-in for Gremlins, and that was a game that was not even sold in the US. And it's really hard for me to imagine Adventure International UK, which is kind of just an international sales and development office. In the mid-1980s, how did they come up with enough free cash to license a Hollywood film without even having the American market to sell into? I don't know, but they did it. But yeah, the arcade game RoboCop was reasonably well known here. You can definitely find RoboCop originals on disc floating around and so forth.
Did you play the RoboCop actual arcade cab at all?
I did. That was where I first saw it. Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of my local arcades had it. It was a lot of fun. It's a very difficult game, slow or not. But yeah, that was a good time.
Yeah, the arcade game's a little bit faster than the home one, but it's still not. It's not fast paced, but it doesn't make it easy. You quite often find yourself regretting something you did a second ago, but not having the consequences quite yet.
I just found a remark in Compute's Gazette from 1989. It says, Batman, Cape Crusader, and RoboCop have sold over 100,000 units each, and this is as of sometime in 1989. So that's a decent seller for sure.
I think the Cape Crusader is
That's a different one.
That's the isometric one, based on the TV series, the campy TV series, the Adam West one.
I don't think it was isometric, but I know what you're referring to. Yeah. It was like
I know the game. Yeah.
Oh, no, it wasn't
I know the game.
isometric. You're right, there's an isometric Batman, and it wasn't that one. This is the cartoony styled one that's, yeah. It did get me thinking, though. I wonder if there's others. And I know about the Lemming statues in Dundee in Scotland. They're bronze, just like RoboCop. And there's actually quite a few of them. They're only about an hour away from me, although it is Dundee and it's dangerous there. People like Mike Daly hang about there. Roam the land. There's plenty of Pac-Man and especially Space Invader mosaics. As you might imagine, they lend very well to it. Mario and even Minor Willy too. Again, it's just good for pixel art. But I didn't find any statues from games when I searched about, and maybe there are some I just don't know about. I'd love to hear in the comments. And you can almost certainly argue the RoboCop one isn't about the game, it's more about the movie, probably. But there's plenty of 80s and 90s film ones around. I found out in the USA that there's a Superman one in Metropolis in Illinois. Now, I learned today that Metropolis is a real place. I assume Metropolis was not a real place.
I've eaten at the McDonald's in Metropolis. It's a real place.
Wow.
Yeah. Did you supersize it?
It was the early 90s. I don't even remember if they had... I mean, you'd think that you would, though. You're right. You absolutely should. How would you not?
I didn't. Metropolis. I mean, it sounds like a generic name for a city that they said, let's not call it. Let's call it any city.
Absolutely.
Cityville. There's a Rocky Balboa statue in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, and I found one close to you, Jason. The Bronze Fawns in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin.
Yep.
Nice.
I presume that's literally 5 minutes away.
Yeah, that one. I can get there for lunch. No problem.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the Bronze Fawns?
I believe I have. It's been a while since I've been on the Riverwalk, but yeah.
Hey. As for the UK, we have a Wallace Gromit in Bristol in England and a Paddington Bear in London. Sadly, though, Mad Max and Crocodile Dundee did not get any statues built in Australia. We are sponsored this week by PCBWay.com. PCBWay are a PCB manufacturing place. They will make PCBs for you. PCBWay also do CNC milling. They will not just make the PCB, but they'll put the little bird seed components that are super difficult to put on it, and you can do the through-hole stuff, the nice relaxing through-hole components yourself. There are shared projects, though, in PCBWay, and that's what we think is their unique selling point. These shared projects allow you to go in, browse, either look for inspiration, look for your first soldering project, look for something to solve a particular problem that you have, look for maybe a replacement part for an old thing or some kind of home automation thing. Jason, you've had a look this week, and what have you found?
I have, and jumping out is a universal smart home modular hub. It's built around an ESP32S3, accepts plug-in radio modules for either Zigbee Thread protocol or proprietary RF. That's a pretty elaborate-looking project.
That actually might suit me because I use Zigbee and I've got a Samsung SmartThings hub, and the Samsung SmartThings hub has started putting adverts on the app, and I hate that. I've paid for it. Stop advertising to me. So I know that eventually I'll have to migrate to one of these things, so that's what I might do.
Yeah, excellent. There's also the Cheetah MX4 Mini. That is a motherboard for, I guess, a DIY 3D printer. So if you're looking to really get into 3D printing from the ground up, you can build your own motherboard and then add the components. And then a fun little project. It's a pumpkin/jack-o'-lantern light. It's operating off of a 9-volt battery with a bunch of LEDs to basically just the idea is it lives inside a pumpkin, and you can do some custom illumination. So everything from hardcore home automation to a little gimmicky thing you can stick inside fruit.
Just in time for Halloween.
It's perennial. You wipe it down, you get it ready for next year. All this and more at PCBWay.com.
Thank you for sponsoring us.
Seek 200, the lead track on Information Society's 1990 album Hack, kicks off with a repeated sample from, of all things, the film version of Peter Pan. All of this has happened before, and it will all happen again. And that, I think, is the best way to cope with entering yet another period of computer memory supply crunch and price increase, as captured in multiple submissions to our subreddit this week. Squelch411 shared a story from Ars Technica. This was also widely reported elsewhere, that the international memory giant Micron Technology would be shutting down its consumer-oriented brand Crucial early in 2026 after nearly 30 years in the market. Micron says it will focus instead on its business-to-business clients, including but not limited to that big data center boom that's going on. Investors, by the way, think they are making very good decisions because Micron's stock price has more than doubled since early September, and that certainly doesn't help, or isn't hurt, rather, by the fact that retail RAM prices have gone up anywhere between 2- and 4-fold in that same time frame. And now, one thing I want to throw in here is that I haven't seen anywhere where Micron says they won't allow their RAM to be sold to consumers. It's simply that they're going to exit the direct-to-consumer model that they had with Crucial.
Yeah, and there's nothing to say that they won't resume it again in 2028 once this all calms down. I mean, there's no reason for them not to be able to do that. And with the profit margins they're making, I mean, as far as I understand, it's no more expensive for them to make the RAM if they're the manufacturer. It's just way more profitable to sell it. And if they're selling for 3 times the amount, then their margin might have been 30% before. Now it's 270%. So they'd be daft to let this go. I mean, they've got to maximize profit by going all for it, and it's us that suffer.
Yeah. But as I say, all of this has happened before, and it will all happen again. Chromanticore linked us to a half-hour episode of Frontline Scotland, an episode produced by BBC Scotland in 1996. And it was a time when, oh look, prices and demand for memory were high enough that crime waves focused exclusively on RAM chips, SIMs, and the like as a viable form of illegitimate business. Sometimes they would target supplies at the source, warehouses and assembly plants and the like. Other times they were just raiding offices, cracking open PCs, and ripping the RAM out. There's a reply in the comments mentioning that somebody was working at an office that was hit twice by this kind of targeted theft during that period. So, Dave, can you account for your whereabouts? And do you have receipts for all the memory you acquired in the mid-1990s?
Are you going to ask me to pay VAT on them as well? The first RAM I bought in the 90s was the 2 meg Marpet upgrade for my Atari ST, which came mail order. I don't think that would have been. But following that, it would be forgettable RAM sticks for various PCs that I had. Sadly, I don't have any left. I do now have a big box of PC RAM that I've accumulated by accident over the past 5 or 10 years. And most of the ones that you wouldn't want, the ones that kind of have too low capacity to use in the retro machines and so on. But I can't rule out having bought stolen RAM, because I was buying RAM from I wasn't buying it mail order. I was buying it from little kind of independent shops. And what's to say those independent shops weren't saying to a student, look, if you're in the university lab and no one else is there, it's dead easy. Just open the case and take out all but one of the RAM sticks and it'll still work. And it might have problems, but it won't be immediately obvious. And I know that happened because universities had to cope with it. And they then had to lock the things and put an intrusion alarm on and all the rest of it. So I know that RAM theft was a thing. Because, I mean, if you were in an office, all you had to do was to go to an office PC and take out the RAM, and it wouldn't that day show up a problem, if you know what I mean. It would be, someone would say, my computer's very slow, I need to do something about it. And IT would say, well, have you tried rebooting? And only then, afterwards, would they realise the RAM was gone and would be difficult to identify. So I know it happened a lot. Certainly here, where we're a bunch of thieves, by the looks of it. I'm sure it was happening elsewhere as well. I'm sure it was.
Locally sourced, yep. I doubt it's a coincidence that Micron was launching its Crucial brand in 1996, again, a time where memory is going into heavy demand. A lot of people are acquiring technology. Windows 95 is giving the industry that more approachable vibe. It's prime time for a techie brand to establish a rock-solid consumer brand. Now, it's also worth pointing out that I think part of the factor here could be that tech brand names don't mean what they used to. And if you don't know what I mean, or you're pretending you don't know what I mean, go to your favorite marketplace site and just start searching for SD cards and tell me how far you go into the random jumble of names that look too cheap to bother with, and then the ones that start to sound just legitimate enough and just enough of a bargain versus the big brands that you might give them a try. As I say, all of this has happened before, and it will all happen again. The most casual searches for RAM price or supply shocks will turn up key events in years including, but not limited to, 2013, 2002, 1996, 1993, 1988. Chris, you are the chillest of the three of us. You're also a fellow Mac user. Help me out here. I mean, this doesn't really matter to our lives, does it? I mean, our phones and increasingly our computers have soldered on, definitely not user serviceable memory. So what are we stressing out about?
I don't know if I'm going to agree with you here. Actually, I think we do still need to stress a little bit. I mean, even looking at phones, which you never think as a serviceable item, I do miss being able to increase the storage, for example, by popping in a micro SD card. Not so much a thing these days. Mac, my advice, if you're going to buy one, spec it for what you need. And, not being able to add more RAM or storage, especially down the road, is, well, it's crazy in a laptop or a desktop. And I think it's actually an indefensible move. But yes, with 16 gig of RAM, I do love my MacBook Air. Rendering out a 15-minute video in 2.5 minutes hasn't gotten old yet. I'm actually loving it.
I would comment, though, that Apple users don't need to worry, because what Apple have done is they've been consumer-focused, and they've already priced in the 4 times the cost of RAM into the prices you were buying them for last year.
100%. In fact, their prices are now cheap. I should have grabbed the one with 32 gig. Like, it would be a bargain now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kidding, sort of, yes and no. I mean, does the price of DDR5 memory matter to most retro projects? No, probably not most of them. And a lot of projects that are being put together for vintage platforms are already relying on new old stock chips. These are not things that are flying off the fabs now. So the daily spot price of that modern 32 gig RAM module is not terribly relevant to the price that you're going to pay for a 16K or a 256K RAM chip. I do feel pretty confident in saying that I don't think this kind of RAM price spike will have an impact on what people over the next 24 months can actually do with their computers, and not nearly the way that memory prices genuinely impinged on the usefulness of some early computers. It is very difficult to imagine doing much on one of these nowadays, but original IBM 5150 PCs sold with as little as 64K of RAM. There were those 16K Spectrums. Of course, there were also very minimal onboard memory on those Motorola 68,000 powered cousins, the Amiga, Atari ST, and original Macintosh. The original Macintosh managed to ship with a lousy 128K on board. It was laughably tiny. I have argued before and will argue again. I think the original Mac 128K might be like the worst value in computing of all time. It was $1 billion and you could not do anything on it. The first gen ST and Amiga were not all that much better. These were definitely machines which would have benefited a lot. They would have been a lot more useful if RAM prices had allowed them to ship with 2 to 4 times their base complement without inflating the price over much.
I don't think we should blame Apple, Commodore, or Atari for it, because RAM prices were doing the opposite in 1984, 1985, and they were designing the Atari ST with less RAM. They were designing the Amiga with less RAM, and then RAM prices went through the floor. And they said, well, we can go up to 0.5 meg in these. And then, of course, the ST famously, the first 1 megabyte computer for under $1,000. But RAM prices, there's a story to be told about them going the other way and things changing the market that way.
Well, and Apple were just setting up their future business model by shipping a computer with not enough RAM and then just telling users you're using it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that RAM prices are notoriously swingy. But before I launch into mine, do you guys have any top tips for twirlers looking to do more with less memory?
Yeah. Stay in the past. Reboot your computer often. Close your browser tabs. And, of course, download more RAM. And if that doesn't work, then use a RAM doubler.
Download all the RAMs. This story actually in the RAM prices, I mean, RAM was never cheap when we got back into this stuff, right? I remember the first RAM I ever bought was for my Amiga 500. That was a 512K RAM expansion for the Amiga 500, and it cost me 50 quid. That was a lot of money for me back in 1990. I had to save for that, right? And I do remember, I'm glad the story made mention of it, because I was working in London at the time, so around 96, 97, where, yes, burglars were breaking into offices, not to steal the PCs, but to just grab the RAM because they could fill their pockets, and it was worth a lot of money, as you mentioned earlier. My tips, though, bring up, especially if you're looking to build or buy a new machine, with the machine you've got now, bring up Task Manager and go into the system's resources and see what RAM you're actually using, not what you think you need, and do your most intensive tasks. This is what I did before buying my Mac. And when I did that, I was doing exporting from Premiere, working in Photoshop, had Edge open, so it's on my PC, and I was not maxing out 16 gig of RAM. So then I realized, actually, I don't need to spend a fortune on my Mac. 16 gig is enough for my use case. So I think that's a really good one. And, oh yeah, ditch Chrome.
Oh, Chris, I'm obligated to point out you weren't just getting 512K of RAM. You were also getting a clock.
That is true. I did buy the one, not necessarily, but mine did have the clock. Yeah, the £50 one did have the clock and a time bomb of a battery.
Yeah. So my main advice in this, again, is not to panic. I mean, hopefully, if you are in a business where you're trying to solve a major existential problem like, curing cancer or Mars colonization or reclaiming precious metals from landfills or whatever, hopefully you had enough spare cash that you are hedging these kinds of purchases and won't be done in by a temporary price spike. But if you really do feel that this is getting in the way of your retro lifestyle, don't fear virtual memory. None of us liked wading through those noisy, painful swaps of memory to hard disk, but virtual memory is a concept. I mean, it is almost as old as computing itself. It exists for a reason. We are not, promised as our birthright access to all of the instant memory we want just because we want it. I'm not saying, as Dave mentioned, to go out and commit to using RAM doubler again. I'm just saying you don't have to strictly buy more memory than you've ever seen for your modern computer use. And I know that some modern Windows architectures ship with a 16 or a 32 or 64 gig dedicated SSD for swap. They call it something fancy, but it is essentially just a dedicated virtual memory drive. If you have a workload that's being done in by lack of memory, consider moving it back to a retro platform. Lots of programs are on net just as responsive on an old platform as they are on your shiny new 2025 computer. And kind of as Chris was implying, consider looking for applications which are not running in your browser or are just a wrapper around another browser running in its own window. Tons of applications now are really just, kind of semi-secret payloads with Chromium or another free web browser wrapped around them. Older school programs that are written to hit your computer's operating system directly, or at least more directly than a browser, often have lighter resource requirements. Really just keep doing what you're doing, because all of this has happened before and it will all happen again.
On to housekeeping. I'd like to welcome a new patron. I'd like to welcome on Mark, who signed up during last week's recording, so we probably thought we'd missed him out. But no, Mark, sorry. We didn't know until after we'd hit the end button. Welcome on to the roster of twirlers, official twirlers. If you'd like to join Mark and all the rest, where would you go, Chris?
You would go to reddit.com/r/this week. No, we would go to pet. Do you know what? I zoned out because I was looking down at what.
Go to the pet shop and buy a puppy.
I was just checking further on down the notes. What are we talking about, Dave?
Jason, are you
Patreon.
any better than Chris?
Patreon.com/this week in retro. Sorry.
Got there eventually. Thank you.
Terrible.
There were loads of interesting replies on the comments and on our Discord about joysticks. I really enjoyed that. Lots of confirmation that the US, the EU, and the UK markets were really quite distinct, with each market having its own range of sticks, but with some crossover. So thank you so much for all the replies on that. And a wee reminder, next week's episode is the final episode of the year. It's our Christmas special. It's going to be special. We've got two guests coming on, and not a pair. I mean, they're two unrelated people who are coming on. It's going to be probably a bit chaotic. It's going to be certainly loads of fun. I'm very excited. But I want to ask you, if you go into the subreddit, please submit anything Christmas related, because I think we'd like to have some Christmas things to talk about.
Chris will be very sad if we don't get Christmas stories.
I will actually be very sad.
Just put it out there. Direct appeal.
Yeah.
Chris wants Christmas stories. Please give us Christmas stories.
Today, right now, on to news and briefs. And OKYam894 has let us know that Nick Thorpe, the features editor at Retro Gamer magazine, has passed away at the age of 38, a very young age, a tragic loss and a terrible time of year for it. Very sorry to see that.
Yeah, not good at all. Squelch411 has a PC Gamer article for us on Unreal Tournament 2004 being revived and for free. The IP owners, Epic, have given the fan community old Unreal the green light to do it. That is fantastic news. That's probably my favorite in the franchise, actually.
Starcade 2084 let us know that Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, who played Shang Tsung in the Mortal Kombat movie, as well as performing in things like Man in the High Castle, Last Emperor, lots of voice acting gigs, has passed away at the age of 75.
I Am Batman links us to a video on MD Engine, a game-making tool for the Mega Drive. You can even get it on Steam.
And a new Carmageddon game is coming in 2026. Thanks, Bajako, for letting us know. Dave seems very happy about it. He says he hopes it's not just a generic game with Carmageddon license slapped on it. Oh, that's very interesting.
That happens.
I mean, they did one not long ago for the PS4, so it'd be interesting to see what's new about. Yeah. Be interesting to see what's new about this one.
There's a habit of all these things. Oh, this is coming back, and then someone said, "Yeah, it came back 2 years ago, and then 5 years before that, and then 7 years before that, and it didn't make a dent." Yeah.
And Pajaco also linked us to a video of Mad Little Pixel making a Sega Dreamcast Mini using a Raspberry Pi and a Dreamcast-style Pi 5 case. Dave tells us it doesn't look too difficult.
It really doesn't. It's just stuff you can buy and assemble. There's no soldering, no 3D printing, nothing involved. It's a nice little project that normal people like me could do. Chris, you could manage it.
I doubt it. Starcade 2084 shared with us another great clip from the BBC archive, which was upvoted nicely. It's a clip from a programme I remember well, Nationwide, presented by Frank Bow. In the clip, originally aired on BBC One, Boff. Okay, we'll go Boff. In the clip, originally aired on BBC One, 19th of October 1982, Frank interviews writer and director Steven Lisberger, firstly about the making of the film Tron, and then about the arcade game, which they both then play on screen. Stephen does mention, in brief, as is often the way on television segments like this, how multiple film animation techniques were used in the making of the movie. And I'm sure most of us have heard the stories of hand-painted cells of film being shipped from Taiwan before the ink was even dry. Yep. And the black and white filming of the characters and the use of the backlit animation technique to give the glowing effect that makes the movie so very special. But on the BBC segment, what he talks about the most was the use of computer technology, as if it was the main use of the film, as if the whole film almost had been made with it, which clearly wasn't the case, as confirmed by actual behind-the-scenes documentaries that I'll also link in the show notes for you to have a look at. It was only about 20 minutes of CG, computer-generated animation that were actually used in the movie, as well as, I think, some of the static backgrounds that they used in some scenes for composition. They were CGI as well, but in terms of animation, only about 20 minutes. And that 20 minutes, of course, was not all in one go, but it was chopped up into relevant fragments of scenes. But I don't want to get bogged down in all of that. I actually want to marvel at what was achieved, because for the time, this was genuinely groundbreaking. So companies like Magi, Cinevision, and Triple I were commissioned between them, and they created CGI components for the movie. And they each were using different technologies. So depending on what the scene required would depend on, which of the houses did that particular piece of animation. Now, each frame, of which, of course, there's 24 frames per second of film, took at least 10 minutes to render out. And according to some sources, trickier frames took up to 6 hours. 6 hours to render one single frame, specifically for the scenes involving the solar sailor ship, due to the translucent sails, which the director was not keen on moving away from. He wanted that look and feel, so the machine had to churn it out. Wikipedia suggests that one of the computers used only had 20 megabytes of RAM, because they couldn't afford it. It's too expensive, Dave.
Couldn't afford it, yeah.
Yeah, well, 20 megabytes of RAM and 330 meg of hard disk space. But those are actually big numbers for 1980.
Oh, huge.
Yeah, that's massive, right? My first PC, which was much later, that was 4 meg, right? 4 meg of RAM and a 60 meg hard drive. And also the computers, so think about this, the computers couldn't actually animate, not even in wireframe. So they couldn't do a preview to see how the animation was going to turn out. They literally had to render out the frames and then use stop motion camera to capture each frame onto film to then be able to watch the sequence back. By the mid to late 90s on PC and Mac, we had software packages like Infinity, 3D Studio Max and Maya, and all of those. And Maya was actually, on all of those platforms and the Amiga, we also had Lightwave. So by the mid to late 90s, it really did seem like anything was possible. Dave?
Was Babylon 5 done on the Amiga?
It doesn't get talked about much, but I think I think maybe it was, Dave. Although it was only the pilot episode, but I think you might be right. Oh yeah, the listeners probably didn't know that. They've probably never heard that before.
The pilot in the first season.
Yeah. And of course, by this time, I mean, we're talking about computers. Your home computer could run these software packages, right? Obviously, a more expensive workstation is going to do it better. But even on your home computer, you could easily preview a scene, even with animation in wireframe, or you could render out test scenes to test your sequences. You could sort of untick some of the effects so that it would render out quicker, but it was all usable. But in the final render, if you're actually doing something serious or you want it to look good, even if it's just a show off to your mate, you could still stare at a screen for tens of minutes to multiple hours as each frame appeared, obviously depending on the complexity. Keeping in mind, by this time, we're talking 3D cards, which helped with the previews in the software, Pentium 3 machines or PowerPC equivalents, which Jason loves, and 256 meg of RAM, if you're lucky, maybe more. But because of my interest in animation, both at home and at work, this was a period for me where I would watch a movie or a TV show just to watch the animations and to think about how they'd done it. And things were moving so fast at that point in time. So, guys, did you mess about with 3D animation at all? Did you play with any of the software I've mentioned or different ones I haven't thought of? Or did you even just watch shows and movies to marvel at the effects? Jason?
For the record, unless you count my Amiga 4000 Tower, which had one of those PowerPC accelerators, but it was really just a coprocessor, I've never used a PowerPC machine as my daily driver. So I love reporting on things on this show, Chris. I love spending every week grinding away at these various topics with you guys. That's what I love. I don't love the PowerPC itself. I love sharing it with everybody out there.
Well, even the next box.
So why'd you hate the PowerPC? Why'd you hate it?
Sure. Yeah. That's now we're getting there. All right, back to the topic at hand. When I saw Monsters, Inc. in the theater, I saw and marveled, like you say, Chris, as I was meant to, at that scene where the creature's fur is blowing gently in the wind. And I said, my God, that is the most amazing digital effect I have ever seen. And I could feel in that moment, I'm like, I will never need to be impressed by a digital effect again. I'm done. And it really, I don't need to see anything that tops that. Nothing in my mind could ever top that. I don't care. I don't need to see it. I saw the fur. I'm done. As far as like using this stuff myself, I have very poor artistic skills, physical art generally. I'm not great at 3D visualization on 2D surfaces. So we are well out of my personal wheelhouse when it comes to that. But yeah, I mean, to your point that like those workstations that were, doing the work of Tron and other animation tasks at that time, like the fact that the computer couldn't animate it, that was just sort of par for the course. That's where things like the Amiga Juggler demo are impressive. Like those frames were definitely not being rendered in anything remotely like real time, but the fact that they were being full screen animated by a basic, home computer at that time with minimal storage overhead, that was one of the things that made it so impressive and gave the Amiga that very brief window in the sun as a standout platform for animation.
I don't like to look at the DVD extras on how it's made, because I think looking behind the curtain kind of damages the production. I like to be fooled by the CGI. I like to not think that's CGI in films. And I think modern days, we actually mentioned this many, many episodes ago, Chris, modern films using CGI are too busy. There's too many things going on, and just can you calm down on it? But we can use CGI, so we'll use CGI everywhere, all over the screen, something happening everywhere.
Yeah, the Michael Bay Transformers movies, I can't watch them. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. It's to stop you thinking about the plot. So there's that, but I still don't think that CGI is even yet up to scratch with some practical effects. I mean, Lord of the Rings, they talk about The Hobbit used CGI orcs, but Lord of the Rings used practical effects orcs, and Rings of Power used practical effects, and they seem better. But obviously some CGI stuff is great. We can easily find examples of CGI in the noughties where it looks really poor now, and it was thought to be good enough for production films. I mean, we've talked in the past about how Jordan Mechner, who, as Jason will tell us,
This Week in Retro subreddit poster Jordan Mechner, thank you,
made his games look much more convincing by using rotoscoping. And I don't think without the rotoscoping, Prince of Persia would be nothing special. And it's not just enjoyable because of the rotoscoping, but because of the rotoscoping, you get into the game more. And you can see the advances over the years. I mean, Jar Jar Binks in Star Wars, I didn't think looked that good. I am a big Star Wars fan, of course. Jar Jar Binks didn't look that great, and I assumed he was just CGI, but he's motion capture. But it took until Gollum in Lord of the Rings before using the same... I mean, famously, Andy Serkis from Lord of the Rings and Gollum famously brought that character to life because he was going about with all these dots in his faces. And that's instrumental in bringing that process mainstream, which is now used lots. But going back to Tron, though, I think the reason why Tron looks so good is because I think the film was designed around what was possible and what would look good, as opposed to writing a script and then going to the effects guys, you need to make this happen now. Create a film, create the effects around the film we've written.
You're kind of actually spot on there, Dave, about writing a movie around an effect. But interestingly, it wasn't so much the CGI, it was the backlit animation that gives off the glow effect. And in fact, that's the origin of the Tron character. They'd already done this with backlit animation and sold it as a TV promo for some rock radio stations. And they named the resulting character Tron. That's essentially the birth of Tron. So for me, I remember one animation I did for work in 3D Studio Max, just for my own memories in this field. We were behind schedule and I had my home PC running as much as I could overnight, babysitting it into the early hours of the morning. For the remainder of the animation that still needed to be done, I ran to work early the next day, found out who in the building was off work that day so that I could hijack their PCs. So I had about 8 machines all rendering out a unique section of the animation. And by the end of the day, I had the sequence rendered, but I still had to stitch them together in Premiere, add the music, and do the export. The duration of this monster animation, 3 minutes, 30 seconds. But I can't talk about Tron or 3D animation without giving a shout out to the wonderful YouTuber Holden Modify. I might have mentioned him before. He does amazing videos where he shows what the Amiga and Lightwave can do, both on the hardware and also happily in emulation as well. And he creates many scenes from Tron. That seems to be one of his go-tos, but he does it using Lightwave on the Amiga. So please do check him out. But I also, in closing, I actually want help from the community. Because I know this is a real memory. It's not a blurred memory. It's not something I've made up or something I dreamt. I distinctly remember seeing an Amiga demo, and I saw it running at my local computer shop, Megabytes. It was a PD demo they got their hands on. And everybody was amazed because it was basically a recreation of some of those wonderful scenes from Tron involving the tanks and the light cycles. But it was all done as an Amiga demo. So it was animated in real time, using the kind of flat shade polys that you saw in the games of the time. And that's how this thing ran. So I can't for the life of me find a copy. So help me out. Somebody out there knows that demo. And now it's time for our community question of the week, which last week was, what is your favorite joystick and why? And I think we also asked if you like to hold it in your hand or you have it based on your desk. So... Are we out of contest mode?
Yeah.
We are.
Duncan gave us an answer, and he says, I like the Quick Joy Top Star. After a few other models letting me down, the Top Star felt like a really solid unit and is still clicking. I don't know what that one is.
I don't know the Top Star.
Quick Joy Top Star.
No, don't know.
I'm sure Duncan, of all people, can put an image of it on screen so at least our viewers know what it is.
Probably got one.
I've got an idea of what it might be. No, it's just it's just a small base, great big flight grippy stick.
Okay. Never heard of it. Wow. And I had quite a few Quick Joys. Jason, do you want to read out number one?
Sure. Richard Shears, Quick Shot Turbo 2. It was crap, but it was my first micro switch joystick and it didn't break. I loved the look, and being a flight sim fan, it was the style that appealed. It's the joystick I feel the most nostalgia for.
You weren't playing it hard enough, Rich. I broke plenty of those. Dave, who's next?
The Vanacera says, my favourite joystick, still the MS Sidewinder 3D Pro and its sibling, the Precision Pro, which is still usable in modern Windows. Pretty crazy to think. Even crazier is that the Force Feedback Pro is still usable in modern systems too. I don't know if people know, there was a period where Microsoft made all these peripherals, and they were really good peripherals.
Yeah, they
They
were.
weren't cheap, nasty rubbish.
Yeah, it's true. My name is Uncle Groucho, says Conic Speed King, an absolute beast for Daley Thompson's decathlon. That's a nice small one that you hold in your hand, isn't it?
Yeah.
With a little,
Yeah, that's the one you hold in your hand. And they advertised it with someone wearing a motorcycle glove. And the interesting thing is that we found, thanks to viewers from last week and listeners from last week, is it was sold in the USA, but it wasn't called the Speed King. It was called the 500XG.
Yep.
I thought you were going to say we found the motorbike glove.
Yeah, or like we know what model of gloves they were. I really thought that's where you're going.
Found them on eBay. All the prices have just gone up.
I could lie about it, but no. So sold with a different name in the USA, just like the competition pro stuff. We found out there was some things sold with different names as well.
Yeah, a lot of good answers. I think some people may have been heavily downvoting ones too, because I think some of the vote totals dropped since the last time I saw these. So
really?
I think there was some last minute ballot box stuffing on this one.
I mean, I downvoted anything that didn't say zip stick, which was all of them. So,
Jason, have you seen the cheetah tortoise before?
Was that Pajaco's stick that he was? Or
yeah,
was
it's the one. Neil's got one in the cave, and he called it Trevor. Neil's has got one. Neil, former host, calls it as Trevor. It came in a box with little holes poked in the box so that the tortoise could breathe in the box.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah,
that's cute.
The worst stick you could use. I mean, absolutely awful. But interesting.
We saw some of sort of the alpha and omega of joysticks in our Discord channel right after that question dropped. People just sort of show their whole collections and got the best and the worst of what's available.
That was particularly interesting. People were saying, "Look, haven't bought these joysticks on purpose, but I've got all these retro computers, and they've come with joysticks. So we got to see what a random selection of joysticks in the United States of America looks like, etc. And that helps you say, okay, things were different."
Mm.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the Kraft Maze Master, like it got mentioned in the replies, but it seems like that design was relatively unknown outside of North America. It's a nice,
Doesn't affect the standings, but I've just upvoted Uncommitted Logic and who else was it? Spinator, because they both mentioned Zipstick. So there you go. Thanks, guys.
On to the question of the week for next week.
It must be what's that demo that Chris is thinking of?
Yeah, what's that demo that Chris is thinking of gets you 1,000,000 points if you think of it. No, it is. What retro icon would you commission a statue of?
That's good.
What's your answer, Chris?
I don't know. I know I need to put some thought into that. Yeah. Nothing springs to mind yet.
The Avatar from Ultima.
And where would we vote on that?
You would go to the subreddit, which, Chris, your terrible URLs, here's your chance for redemption.
Patreon.com reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Next week's going to be fun. This was a nice, calm episode. We'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us.
That will be the
Bye. Dave's waving.
Proverbial fifth wheel. Bye,
Jason's
everybody.
waving. I'm
Jason's waving.
I'm weaving.
Yeah.
Waving and waving. Bye.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.